Law enforcement practices in the US have been under scrutiny. The death of George Floyd, an unarmed black man 4 years ago, sparked calls for nationwide police reforms. Lawmakers here in New York promised to address racial disparities in policing. Some argue those efforts are falling short.
Black people are disproportionately likely to be sent to a city jail.
Researchers say 59% of police stops in the city in 2022 involved black people, despite making up just 23% of the local population.
Within virtually every neighborhood, every individual neighborhood, there were racial disparities in who was put into jail and who was not at that neighborhood level.
Analysts say these trends can be extrapolated at the national level. Roughly 1.2 million people in the US are serving time in state or federal prisons, according to 2022 data. Black Americans make up less than 14% of the nationwide population, but roughly 32% of incarcerated Americans. Experts believe some of these trends can be traced back to the war on drugs in the 1970s.
Someone may have committed a small offense, and sometimes they will let them go and sometimes they won't. And we do believe that someone's racial and ethnic background influences that decision making and influences that discretion at the law enforcement level. And that's why you do see in drug cases higher rates of arrest for people of color.
Advocacy groups say more change, like bail reform, is needed to tackle racial discrimination and mass incarceration in the US. According to the Vera Institute, in 2020, 1 in 7 people in a US prison was serving a life sentence. They say that's more than the entire prison population back in 1970. But polling suggests Americans are split on the issue of sentence lengths. Thomas Gant spent a quarter of a century behind bars for second-degree murder. He now works to give people the tools to adapt to life after being released.
If people are languishing in prison for many years, the harms is continued, because at the end of the day, these are human beings. These are people who, is going to come home and want to be productive, I should add. And so just the mere harm of not giving a human hope is harm. One of the worst things you could ever do to any human is not give them hope.
The Centre for Community Alternatives receives state funding. Gant's colleague Patrick Stevens is meeting lawmakers in Manhattan to keep pushing for reform in criminal justice.
A lot of what we do under Communities Not Cages is advocate for certain bills that would reduce the prison population. One of those would be eliminating mandatory minimums act is one. The Earned Time Act and also the Second Look Act are the 3 primary bills that we're looking to get passed by this year or hopefully next year.
Last year, New York passed the Clean Slate Law. The move seals certain convictions after a set duration. It could provide roughly 2 million people in the state with greater access to housing and employment. Campaigners say it's a win, but argue much more is needed to address racial disparities in the system and truly wipe the slate clean. William Denselow, CGTN, New York.